WATD.com.
Welcome to the Natural Health and Healing Show with one of New England's leading nutritionists, Mark Mincola. The show is brought to you by the Good Health Stores in Hanover and Quincy. Call Mark at 781-837-4900 with your health and nutrition questions. Now, here's Mark.
Good evening and welcome. And a very happy St. Patrick's Day weekend, everybody out there, and happy week of spring, first week of spring. Hardly feels that way right now, but so the calendar says spring is on the way and coming to visit us this week. So welcomed it is. And the winter takes a while, and of course it's probably still got a few expressions for us, but we'll survive nonetheless. And I hope you're well. Hope everybody's healthy. There's been an awful lot of sneezing and coughing, and an awful lot of people reporting various colds and flus. So we hope you're on the mend, and we hope you've been taking your Monolaurin, etc. So best to everybody out there, and thank you so much for joining us. We're going to talk this evening about, I guess it was about 2 weeks ago, 14 days ago, I've had, over the months, I've actually had a couple mothers of soldiers who are in the Middle East who've mentioned to me that there's been sort of a tug of war between the Army and between a number of different families regarding their sons receiving mandatory vaccines, specifically the anthrax vaccination. And I couldn't help but notice last weekend's Patriot Ledger had a really fascinating article that I wanted to just kind of start off with. Mandatory shots for anthrax okayed. And this is from the AP Press in Washington. The Pentagon can require its troops be vaccinated against anthrax, a federal judge said Friday. Judge Rosemary M. Collier said the Food and Drug Administration acted appropriately when it found that the vaccine to be safe and approved its use. She dismissed a lawsuit by military officials who argued the drug is unproven and the unscientific data unsound. The court will not substitute its own judgment when the FDA made no clear error of judgment, Collier wrote. The judge suspended the vaccination program in the year 2004 after faulting the FDA's process for approving the drug. After the FDA redid the process and again found it to be safe, the military announced plans to reinstate mandatory vaccinations. That prompted this latest lawsuit by 8 military members who argue the vaccine should be optional. The Pentagon continues to require the vaccine, saying the program is necessary to protect soldiers from anthrax attacks. We owe it to our service members to give them every possible protection, Pentagon spokesman Brian Whitman said. Force protection is the number one priority in the Defense Department, and the anthrax inoculation program is an important force protection measure. Mark Zaid, an attorney for the plaintiffs, said the FDA relied on outdated studies that didn't prove the vaccine is safe or effective against inhaled anthrax. It would appear the court has condoned an agency's manipulation of decades-old data to support a present-day policy objective, Zaid said. We're absolutely going to appeal. That, again, appeared in last weekend's Patriot Ledger, and remarkable tug of war that is taking place as we speak. And if you really take the time to truly look into the anthrax situation, it is profoundly disturbing. And when you think of the fact that so many thousands of young men and women who actually went to the Middle East during the first occupation were returning from that conflict with what you and I have come to see as a very, very serious condition. And many people, of course, have had very serious Gulf War syndrome symptoms with fever, aching joints, swollen lymph nodes, bleeding rashes, muscular aches, swollen joints, as we said, hair loss, memory loss, etc. So, I think when you find out that there are those among us who really believe there's a direct corollary between mandatory anthrax vaccination and Gulf War syndrome symptoms, it's even all the more disturbing. And when you consider the testimony that Senator John D. Rockefeller IV gave when he went on to share his investigational roots and his information with fellow senators in Washington, explaining that in his mind, based on testimony that he'd heard, there was clearly a very direct corollary between Gulf War syndrome and anthrax vaccinations. And tonight we're going to talk a great deal about that, about the real truth about anthrax vaccine. Is it safe? Is it not? And what should be done about it? We're going to leave that to you. And we'll be back in just a moment or two after these messages. Right in our area, we are fortunate to have one of the top martial arts schools in the country, Personal Best Karate. Personal Best has been recognized for their community involvement, professional staff development, character building programs, and exciting educational curriculum. Personal Best stands at the top of their industry. 5 locations offering personalized professional instruction. Not sure if karate is right for you? At no obligation, the staff at Personal Best will guide you in a private introductory program to see if karate is indeed the right fit to help you achieve your goals and meet your needs. What does karate at Personal Best teach you? Character building, success habits, helps you get in shape, relieve stress, self-control, setting goals, and of course, self-defense. Personal Best's goal is to create successful, contributing members of society through the practice of the martial arts at Personal Best. Mr. Chris Rappold is, of course, the founder of Personal Best Karate. He tells me his greatest joy of all is to see the personal transformation in each and every student. Bring out your best with Personal Best Karate. Telephone number 508-285-5425. That's 508-285-5425. Locations in Norton, Foxborough, Southeastern, Franklin, and Taunton. That's Personal Best Karate. This segment is being sponsored by Good Health Natural Foods. Good Health is a well-established organic specialty food market as well as a vitamin and sports nutrition shop. Good Health is a family-owned business passionately committed to giving back to the neighborhoods of Boston and the South Shore. The Maturos and the entire Good Health family continue to make an indelible impact on the communities they serve. There are currently 2 extraordinary stores, 1627 Hancock Street, Quincy, Mass., and 219 Columbia Road, Route 53 in Hanover, Mass. For everything natural, organic, and wheat or gluten-free, it's Good Health Natural Foods, open 7 days a week. In Quincy, 617-773-4925. And Hanover, 781-826-0808. That's Good Health Natural Foods. Alrighty, welcome back. And we have a very disturbing, of course, story here that we're discussing this evening, but we're certainly going to share some positive, solutional kind of concepts that we might be able to sort of weave into this. I think it's important to discuss it. One of the things that we like to say at the very end of this broadcast over the past 6 years when we sign off is, remember, be wise, be aware, and be well. In order to be well nowadays, you really do have to be aware, and you certainly do have to be wise about the awarenesses that you remain open to, because there's an awful lot of potential problems out there that are just sort of waiting around every corner, and many of them are health-related issues. And we're in the business of supporting the whole concept of disease prevention. And it's disturbing enough to me that we certainly, at a health policy level in this country, a $2.2 billion healthcare budget, and only 1% is allocated and earmarked for prevention. So we're not much on prevention. I think, this whole concept of teaching people how to look clean and clear for trouble and to stay out of its way, and to be able to cite it and to be able to protect yourself and defend yourself against many of these measures, I think, is a really important component to it. But again, the great articles in the Ledger. Ledger's really, I think there's some great stuff that's been showing up in the Patriot Ledger of late. Not so surprising that right across from this very same article that we just spoke of before the last break, mandatory shots for anthrax okayed, there's another report on the very same page. Report, U.S. Tagged in notifying subjects of secret tests. The Defense Department has made a poor effort to locate and contact thousands of people exposed to chemical and biological agents during a series of secret tests in the 1960s and 1970s. According to a newly released federal report, the tests kept secret for decades were a part of a program known as Project 112, in which service members and some civilians were exposed to actual and simulated agents. All of the Project 112 tests, which began in 1962 and ended in 1974, were initiated under the auspices of the Army's Desert Test Center at Fort Douglas in Salt Lake City. Among those tests were Project Shipboard Hazard Defense and SHAD, in which a number of weapons containing chemical and biological agents such as XV nerve gas, sarin nerve gas, and E. coli bacteria were tested on unknowing military personnel and naval vessels, according to Representative Mike Thompson, Democrat from California, who helped prompt a study into the effects of the tests 4 years ago. So be wise, be aware, be well. You can't fall asleep at the switch. Anyway, let's get back to the business at hand. Mandatory shots for anthrax okayed. A lot of people out there, many people that I encounter in my average week, of course, are folks that have family members, husbands, wives, boyfriends, girlfriends, loved ones, sons, daughters that are presently serving in the military. And many of them, of course, are sort of grappling with this issue of mandatory anthrax shots. And again, this tug-of-war continues to take place even as we speak. So we need to know a little bit more about it. And I think that, again, so many of you out there who have kids that are, well, they're not kids, anybody who defends this nation and really risks life and limb is, no matter what they are, they're not a kid. I know they may be your son or daughter, but they're adults, and they're all heroes for being there, and we need to take a lot better care of them, in my estimate. We need to know that there are 1,300 strains of anthrax. Remarkable. 1863 was when anthrax was first isolated and formulated as a medicinal agent. So as far back as 1863, really anthrax was the very first disease for which a causative agent was isolated and formulated. And then back in 20 years or so after that, Louis Pasteur was the first to develop an anthrax vaccine for animals. And the current human vaccine for anthrax was formulated in the mid-1960s, over 40 years ago. So a lot of folks are thinking, well, I've got a son or a daughter that is overseas right now, and chances are better than good that if this conflict between the military, well, really elements, two different separate elements in the military, and a lot of families as well, who really are apprehensive at the very least about giving the okay for their kids to be vaccinated. Really, I think the key is America needs to know more about it. Certainly science doesn't even know much about it. So we're supposed to just cave in and just say, absolutely, whatever you want to do with these kids, go right ahead and do it. The current vaccine, folks, is over 40 years old. It was licensed in 1970, which was 2 years before the requirement for proof by scientific research. Before that was required, it slipped under the radar. And, again, I think we have to understand that this is an old vaccine. It's a live vaccine, and it's only representing one strain out of 1,300. How effective is it? Back in the 1930s, the Japanese were the first to develop anthrax weapons. The United States and Great Britain followed suit in the 1940s. The first vaccines were really developed by the Soviet Union in the 40s as well. And roughly a decade behind the Soviets, the United States and Great Britain developed their vaccines in the 1950s. The Chinese and the Russians were the first to develop the aerosol version, and the United States and Great Britain really are to create two separate strains in their formulas. In the U.S. uses aluminum hydroxide, among other things, but we'll talk about that more in a minute. The first real testing that was ever done, and again, when this particular conflict that's taking place in Washington right now about the safety of mandatory anthrax vaccines for our troops was first really introduced, the question that, of course, loomed largest was, how safe is it? Have there been enough studies? Is it a live vaccine? Is it an inert artificial vaccine? Tell us more about it. Well, the first studies were actually done in 1954, and they were done on rabbits who were injected with the first vaccine that was developed back in 1940, and they all died within 23 days. The only human trial to date, I'll say that again, for those of you who have children in the military and you're concerned about whether or not they're going to, unfortunately, lose this conflict or lose the libertarian right to have their say in the matter. If indeed it does become mandatory, they will lose that right, of course. But again, think of this, folks. The first study, the only study, human trial to date, was done in 1956. It was reported in a publication in Lancet. That particular clinical trial was done on both humans and monkeys, with, as it was reported, a number of very serious reactions reported. The conclusion of that particular sole trial on humans was that more tests were needed. Since 1956, not a single solitary follow-up study has been done. So that's over 50 years. No follow-up human studies. In 1986 and 1995, the U.S. actually performed animal studies and found the survival rates as recently as 1995 in animal studies was between 0 and 10% in animal studies. In 1998, the United States Army researchers released more monkey studies. Results noted that the vaccines varied in their efficacy among different species. Once again, 1,300 strains. The monkeys were tested for one single strain. So when you've got 1,300 strains, you've got a vaccine that was first formulated some 50 years ago and has only been researched on human beings in trials once, whereby inconclusive results were rendered, serious side effects were reported, and the scientists in that particular study recommended that there be more studies done. Once again, all of these are literally evaluating 1 out of 1,300 strains. The current human anthrax vaccine is called the MDPH /PA for protective agent. It was produced until February of 1998 by the Michigan Department of Health under contract with the Defense Department. And the current formula has been criticized for being 5 times more potent with bacterial matter than the original formula. 5 times more potent with bacterial matter. It also contains aluminum hydroxide. It also contains formaldehyde, benzethonium chloride. These are all very toxic agents as well. Anthrax expert Dr. Merrill Nass, who's widely read. He's authored a number of books on anthrax and is considered one of the top 3 experts globally on anthrax. He claims that as many as 20% of those vaccinated since the beginning of time have developed severe chronic medical problems. He is certainly not a proponent of the vaccination. Once again, as I mentioned just a little while ago, there's been an awful lot of folks. By the way, there's 2 websites I would recommend if everybody wants to kind of grab a pen and paper here. There are two in particular that are, I think, exceptional websites on this matter. For again, a lot of people out there that have relatives, children that are overseas right now, and they deserve our very best effort in terms of research, phone calls notifying your representatives in these matters. We can't sit idle. We have to take an active role in this process. Nonetheless, two real good websites you might want to take a peek at for resourcing. One is www.thinktwice.com. Thinktwice.com. The other is www.anthraxvaccine.org. Anthraxvaccine.org. They're very enlightening sites. There's a tremendous amount of remarkable information on there about the way it is with regards to anthrax vaccine. And again, big issue, shouldn't be on a back page, should be on a front page. Mandatory shots for anthrax okayed. Just to go on here a moment or two, I think one of the things that really, one of the very first questions I always ask when someone asks me a question about a vaccine, the very single most important question that need be answered in my mind is the vaccine live or is it artificial? In countries like Japan, in countries like Australia, in countries like Israel, it's a federal offense to manufacture a living vaccine. The vaccines in those countries right now are artificial vaccines because they understand DNA. We should understand DNA. Nobody does more modification of food than we do. We modify about 73% of our food by modifying the DNA in that food. So we certainly have an understanding and have the tools and have the capacity to appreciate the potential powers of DNA. Well, anybody who understands DNA, even at a very basic level, should understand that with regards to these vaccines, these are living viruses. Living viruses, if indeed it's a live vaccine. And by the way, the anthrax vaccine is a live vaccine. And therefore, it can go through what's called serial passaging and antigenic drifting. That means it doesn't have to remain the same. It can change itself. It can alter its proteins. It can alter its DNA. Is it possible that they can become more virulent? That they can become actually more of a threat on the body? Could they become? Could they morph into some form of rare disease once in the body? Of course, absolutely. Nobody really knows what kind of serial passaging or what kind of antigenic drifting these living vaccines could go through. So it's disturbing that these are living vaccines, for starters. I mean, the first thing that comes to my mind is, like we said earlier, there's been a number of different, the Senate Committee on Veteran Affairs. If you want to take a look, you might want to take a look at that on the internet as well. Senator John D. Rockefeller IV, as we mentioned earlier, went on to share a great deal of his investigative information with the Senate Committee on Veteran Affairs. And this was in 1994. And Senator Rockefeller, then in 1994, shared some really disturbing news. And his news was very simply that he found a very definite direct corollary between many testimonials given by returnees from the Gulf War, who essentially said that they were diagnosed with Gulf War syndrome, fever, aching joints, swollen lymph nodes, bleeding rashes, gums, sinuses, swollen joints, hair loss, memory loss, yada yada. And we've all been basically told that there was a great deal of speculation over the years that they were caused by burning oil wells, rocky nerve gas, etc., etc. And again, the information shared with the Senate Committee on Veteran Affairs by Senator John D. Rockefeller IV was that indeed he sees and did see a very direct corollary between many of these young soldiers returning who have been vaccinated within a 2-week period of time. So within 2 weeks after receiving their anthrax vaccinations, the symptoms of Gulf War syndrome began to rage through their bodies in testimony after testimony after testimony, on and on and on. So these are little tidbits that you might want to check out as you do your continue to do your work and investigate this issue. But once again, I think the key here this evening is, if we're looking to prevent disease, prevent disaster immunologically, if we're looking to maintain our health, which we surely, at least in my mind, have the right to and deserve to, that in this case, the innocence of our young soldiers overseas is really being put at great risk. And no one deserves a healthy ride through life more than those who are risking life and limb for all of us sitting back here. So I think it's extremely important, incumbent on each of us, to take an active role and to look into the issue just like we did this evening, and to contact those people who represent you. That's why they're there. And they are there to represent you. And, like I said earlier, if it's a matter of being very wise, very aware, if you want to maintain your wellness, and that goes for your children and loved ones that may be overseas, because right now there are certainly all of the earmarkings for this steamrolling through. And again, Judge Rosemary M. Collier, just recently said the Food and Drug Administration acted appropriately when it found the vaccine to be safe and approved its use. I'd really like to know what tests they pointed to. How could the FDA possibly have found the vaccine to be safe? What exactly was that based on? That was based on the one human study that was done in 1956 on 1 out of 1,300 strains. See, that's what happens. They know that they can pull that kind of business off because nobody knows any better. But certainly there are those out there that once they look into that information and start to communicate with the representatives, will certainly point to the fact that there is an awareness out here, and there is a hue and cry out here, and there is a concern for these young people over there. As well there should be. Anyway, so the positives here, one of the things that I want people to understand is that there are, first of all, the one positive is that you have the right to research this and to voice your opinion about it, to speak to your representatives. That's the positive. That there's no greater positive on the planet than that. Number two, there are other ways to consider these things. If someone has a young soldier overseas, and let's say that positive news prevails here, and that people preserve and uphold their libertarian right to make a choice in this matter, wouldn't that be great? So let's say, we'll think positively and say that happens. And then you're concerned that, well, what if my child is exposed? Well, you can actually purchase homeopathic anthrax. Homeopathic anthrax. The blue tubes at the health food store. You can order like a 200 potency of anthrax. And if that son or daughter of yours that's overseas, or that husband or wife or boyfriend or girlfriend that's overseas, if you want them to have some degree of homeopathic protection that is, to me, remarkably effective, then what you would do is you'd get them perhaps a 200C or a 200X dose of anthrax, and if whenever that time came where they thought that they might have been exposed, they can actually take 3 or 4 of those pellets twice a day, just to see if they can't maybe boot that immune system up, give their immune system some kind of identification referencing to support their immunity without the risk of very serious toxic side effects. That's the key. All right. We're going to take a short little break. We're going to come back and talk to you about water. We've got a lot to chat with you about water. What is good drinking water, and which direction should we head in to make sure we've got the best drinking water available? We'll be right back.
Hi, this is Catherine from Jaro Formulas. We're happy to announce our new partnership with Dr. Mark Mincola. When we started out in this industry, our intentions were to bring good quality nutrition, cutting-edge science, and reasonably priced products to the market, and also encourage people to take an active role in their own health and wellness. Jarrow Formulas has been in business for over 20 years and is considered an industry leader. Jarrow is incredibly active in consumers' rights to access dietary supplements and creating good quality manufacturing standards for our industry. When we first met Dr. Mincola, we knew that we had a true partner and an ally in the mission of creating a happy, healthy, and wealthy New England through the sharing of knowledge and enthusiasm for health and healing. And we're excited for the world of knowledge that there is that we can share with you all. As we take this journey together with great partners, great energy,